I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there. I'm completely hopeless at it. I was a really bad actor at school, and I've never been able to master the art of mimicry. But in feeling that fear every single day, and then I suppose they think to themselves, well, maybe that there is a way out.
The courtroom was filled with silence as Queen Camilla stood at the center, her fate hanging in the balance. In a moment that would forever change the monarchy, the queen consort, once revered, now disgraced, collapsed to the floor in shock after hearing the verdict. The room erupted into chaos as gasps filled the air. What had just been said to break her, a shocking betrayal of trust, a misuse of millions, and a royal scandal that no one saw coming. This was the moment that would mark the downfall of a queen and the beginning of a new era for the monarchy. As the trial unfolded, the eyes of the world were on Queen Camila. Many had expected a quiet, dignified appearance from her as she faced the consequences of her actions. But no one could have predicted what happened next. The courtroom, once silent and tense with the weight of the charges against her, was suddenly filled with gasps. Queen Camilla, after hearing the final verdict, looked utterly shaken. Her face turned pale, and her hands trembled. Before anyone could react, she collapsed to the floor. It was a shocking moment that left those in the courtroom in a state of disbelief. Guards rushed to her side, while others jumped from their seats to try and assist. The courtroom was in chaos, but one question echoed in the minds of everyone present. What could have been so devastating that it caused Queen Camilla to fall right then and there? The public, both in the courtroom and beyond, had waited eagerly for the verdict. The shock of seeing their queen in such a vulnerable state added to the intensity of the moment. In the weeks leading up to the trial, there had been a surge of rumors, reports, and leaks that pointed to a scandal far deeper than anyone could have anticipated. For years, small whispers had circulated about the misuse of royal funds. Some believed it was merely a matter of poor financial management, while others thought the allegations were exaggerated. But when the truth emerged, it was more damning than anyone could have imagined. It began with the leak of a series of confidential documents, which revealed that millions of pounds from the royal funds had been misappropriated. These funds, which were meant to support public projects, charities, and the royal family's various duties, had been used instead for personal luxuries. The leaked documents detailed extravagant spending on private jets, luxury holidays, and even hush money to cover up past scandals. What shocked the public the most was the revelation that Queen Camila was directly implicated in this misuse of funds. While there had been rumors about Camilla's love for the finer things in life, her fondness for designer clothes, private travel, and exclusive holidays, there had always been a sense that these were just rumors. However, the leaked documents proved that this was no mere gossip. They showed a clear trail of money, one that led straight to the queen consort. For some, this confirmed what they had suspected all along. For others, it was a betrayal too great to ignore. The public response was swift and unforgiving. The nation, already grappling with rising living costs, was outraged to learn that the queen consort had used public funds for her own indulgences. Families were struggling to make ends meet, while the royal family, and particularly Camilla, seemed to live a life of excessive luxury. As protests erupted outside Buckingham Palace, the anger grew louder. The royal family, for so long shielded by their status, was now facing unprecedented scrutiny. The public was demanding answers, and the media, always eager to chase a scandal, was quick to amplify the outrage. The leaks were just the beginning. As more documents and evidence were uncovered, the case against Queen Camilla grew stronger. It wasn't just the misuse of funds that shocked the public. It was the sheer scale of the corruption. These funds, meant to support the monarchy's charitable endeavors, had been diverted to personal accounts, leaving a trail of deceit and betrayal in their wake. The evidence seemed irrefutable. Photos, receipts, and bank records all pointed to one conclusion. Queen Camilla had knowingly used the royal funds for personal gain. The anger from the public was palpable. For many, the royal family's image as a symbol of dignity and service had been shattered. The monarchy, long revered by the British public, was now viewed through a different lens. The Queen Consort, who had once been seen as a stabilizing figure, now found herself at the heart of a scandal that threatened to unravel the very foundation of the royal family. The royal family's ability to avoid legal consequences had always been seen as a privilege. Despite the many scandals that had plagued its members over the years, there had always been a sense that the monarchy was untouchable. From affairs to political influence, the royal family had weathered controversies before. But the evidence in Camilla's case was too strong to ignore. Unlike past scandals, this one couldn't be covered up with carefully crafted press releases or strategic silences. The people had seen too much, and the pressure was mounting. As the trial date drew nearer, anticipation built to a fever pitch. People from all walks of life began to gather outside the courtroom, eager to witness the outcome. The media, as always, was ready to capture every moment. Reporters from across the globe camped outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Queen Camila as she entered the courtroom. Would she be defiant, or would she show signs of fear? At precisely 9:00 a.m., the doors to the courtroom swung open. The cameras flashed, and there, walking into the room, was Queen Camila. She was dressed in a simple black dress, her face pale, her lips tight. She did not smile or wave to the crowd. Her demeanor was stern, almost detached, as she walked past the throngs of reporters and photographers. But what stood out the most was the absence of King Charles. His absence spoke volumes. It was a clear indication that this was not just another royal appearance. It was a moment of crisis for the monarchy. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. The prosecution was ready to present its case, and they wasted no time in laying out the evidence. Bank records, receipts, photographs, they all pointed to the same conclusion. Queen Camila had knowingly misused the royal funds for her own personal pleasures. The trial quickly became a media sensation. Every twist and turn in the case was reported on with sensational headlines, fueling public interest and anger. As the prosecution presented their case, the defense team worked hard to paint a different picture. They tried to position Queen Camila as a victim of palace politics, someone who had been misled by those around her. Her lawyers argued that she had simply trusted the wrong people and had no knowledge of the financial dealings taking place under her watch. The defense even went so far as to claim that Camilla had always acted in the best interests of the monarchy, that her actions had never been intended to harm anyone. But the defense's arguments seemed to fall on deaf ears. The evidence was overwhelming. It painted a picture of a queen who had used her position for personal gain, betraying the very people who had trusted her to serve as a symbol of duty and service. The courtroom, once full of hope, now felt like a place of finality. Queen Camila had no way out. She had been exposed, and the public was demanding justice. As the final moments of the trial drew near, the courtroom grew still. The judge prepared to deliver the verdict, and the world waited with bated breath. What would happen next? Would the queen be held accountable for her actions? Or would the royal family manage to protect her once again? No one could predict what was about to unfold, but one thing was clear. This was a moment that would change the monarchy forever. The courtroom was packed as the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. For days, the nation had followed the case against Queen Camila with bated breath, waiting for the verdict that could either vindicate her or bring about her fall from grace. Tension filled the air as the judge stood to deliver his ruling, his voice steady but firm, as if preparing to announce the end of an era. Everyone in the courtroom, from the reporters capturing every moment to the public watching on television, was on edge, their eyes fixed on the judge. The quiet hum of anticipation was almost palpable, as each person in that room wondered what the future held for the Queen Consort. Queen Camila sat in her seat, her face still pale from the shocking moments earlier when she had collapsed. Though she had regained some composure, her eyes remained fixed, her body tense, as if bracing for whatever was coming next. Her defense team sat beside her, nervously glancing between their client and the judge. The prosecution had laid out its case in painstaking detail, showing the world the truth behind the scandal that had engulfed the royal family. The evidence was overwhelming. For the public, it was hard to imagine how anyone could deny the facts presented before them. As the judge began to recap the case, the courtroom went silent. He spoke methodically, listing the charges, detailing the misuse of public funds, and recounting the many scandals that had been exposed. The audience hung on his every word, knowing that the outcome of this trial would shape the future of the monarchy. The judge's words were not just legal recitations, but a stern reminder of the gravity of the situation. He began by discussing the years of alleged financial misconduct, the lavish spending, and the questionable financial decisions that had led to Queen Camilla's downfall. He reminded everyone of the betrayal the public felt, how they had trusted the royal family to act as a symbol of duty and integrity, only to have that trust shattered by the actions of one of their own. He spoke of the cover-ups, the attempts to silence those who dared to speak out, and the undeniable truth that Camilla had been at the center of it all. The case was clear. There was no escaping the consequences of her actions. As the judge's voice echoed in the quiet room, the weight of the moment settled in. The world had watched, judged, and weighed the evidence. The public, who had followed the trial with rapt attention, could only wonder what the final decision would be. Would Queen Camila be allowed to maintain her position and reputation, or would she face the punishment that so many believed she deserved? The silence in the room was deafening, a collective pause before the inevitable. Then, after a long moment of reflection, the judge spoke the words that would define the next chapter in the royal family's history. "Her Majesty Queen Camilla," he began, his voice steady and cold, "is found guilty of the charges presented before the court." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, a seismic shift in the history of the British monarchy. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The shock was evident on every face. Queen Camila, once seen as a symbol of strength and dignity, was now officially a criminal in the eyes of the law. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some in the audience looked on with tears in their eyes, a mixture of vindication and sorrow, while others remained silent, their faces frozen in disbelief. Queen Camilla's defense team seemed stunned, their hopes dashed in an instant. For a brief moment, it seemed as though time had stopped. The reality of the moment was too overwhelming for many to fully grasp. This was the royal family's darkest hour, and the repercussions of the verdict would be felt far beyond the walls of the courtroom. The judge continued, outlining the sentencing. "Queen Camilla is hereby fined millions of pounds for her role in the misuse of public funds," he stated, his voice firm and final. The fine was a staggering amount, a sum that could bankrupt most individuals. But the financial penalty was only part of the punishment. The judge then announced, "Her Majesty is also sentenced to 2 years of house arrest, to be served within a royal estate, where she will remain under strict supervision." The words sent shockwaves through the room. House arrest was a punishment rarely seen for members of the royal family, and the fact that it was being applied to Queen Camila spoke volumes about the severity of her actions. But the consequences didn't end there. The judge continued. "Additionally, Queen Camila is to be stripped of several royal titles and privileges. From this day forward, she will no longer be known as Her Majesty in any official capacity." The announcement was met with stunned silence. To strip a royal figure of their titles and status was a rare and drastic step. For Queen Camilla, it meant the end of her reign as the queen consort. The title, once seen as a symbol of her position and power, was now lost to her forever. As the judge finished delivering the sentence, the room fell into a heavy silence. Cameras zoomed in on Queen Camilla's face. Her eyes were filled with tears, her once proud and confident demeanor now shattered. She looked lost, broken, and humiliated. The weight of the verdict had clearly taken its toll. It was clear that this was not just a legal defeat for Queen Camila, it was a personal one as well. In front of the world, she had fallen from grace, her reputation in tatters. Just as the judge prepared to end the proceedings, something unexpected happened. Queen Camila's body went limp, and she collapsed to the floor once again. This time, there was no dramatic fall. She simply lost control, her body crumpling as if the weight of the verdict had proven too much for her to bear. The room erupted into chaos once again. Medical personnel rushed to her side, trying to revive her, while the audience looked on in disbelief. Some whispered, others stared in silence, but everyone knew that what had just happened was the culmination of years of secrecy, betrayal, and scandal. Outside the courtroom, the scene was equally chaotic. Protesters, who had gathered for days outside the palace in anticipation of the trial's outcome, now cheered in the streets. Their chants rang out, a collective cry of, "Justice, finally justice!" For many, the verdict had been a long-awaited reckoning for the royal family. The anger and frustration that had built up over the years had finally found an outlet in this moment. But while the public celebrated, others were not as pleased. Loyal royal supporters stood in tears, clutching pictures of Camilla and King Charles, their faces etched with sadness and confusion. For them, this was a painful moment, one that marked the downfall of a figure they had once respected. International media quickly picked up the story, and headlines around the world screamed, "Queen collapses in court after sentence." The royal family's darkest day had now been broadcast live to millions. In the days that followed, the story would continue to dominate news cycles, with updates and reactions flooding the media. Queen Camila's fall from grace had become a global spectacle, one that would reshape public perceptions of the royal family for years to come. Behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace, the royal family's response was measured, but tensions were running high. A royal spokesperson issued a statement from King Charles, expressing sadness and regret over the events that had transpired. His words were full of sympathy for his wife, describing her as a victim of circumstance. But insiders hinted at a different story. Sources close to the king claimed that Charles was not just upset by the scandal, but embarrassed by it. He was furious that the woman he loved had brought such shame to the monarchy. The public, meanwhile, continued to demand answers. The pressure on the royal family was reaching new heights, and the question on everyone's mind was clear. What would happen next? The aftermath of the trial would be just as turbulent as the trial itself. In the days following Queen Camila's sentencing, her health became a focal point. Reports emerged that she was recovering in seclusion, far from the public eye. Rumors began to circulate about the state of her marriage to King Charles. Some speculated that their relationship might not survive the scandal. Whispers of divorce began to spread, though nothing official was ever confirmed. For Queen Camila, the future looked uncertain, and her once promising reign as queen consort seemed to be coming to a swift and dramatic end. The monarchy, too, would face its own reckoning in the wake of the scandal. What had begun as a personal crisis for Queen Camila had quickly become a national crisis, one that would impact the future of the British royal family for years to come. In the hours following Queen Camila's collapse, a spokesperson from Buckingham Palace issued a statement on behalf of King Charles. The message was one of sadness and support, with the king expressing his belief that his wife had been treated unfairly. He referred to the trial as a tragic chapter in the royal family's history, but he reaffirmed his commitment to standing by Queen Camila. The statement, while carefully worded and measured, did little to quell the growing storm. While the king publicly expressed his support for Camila, insiders within the palace hinted at a much different, more private reaction. Sources close to King Charles revealed that he was not just upset, but furious. Many believed that the king's public support of his wife was a facade, a necessary step to protect the monarchy's image. Behind closed doors, however, there was reportedly a deep sense of embarrassment. The scandal had not just tainted Queen Camila's reputation, but had also cast a long shadow over the entire royal family. The revelations of financial misconduct, the misuse of public funds, and the betrayal of public trust were a devastating blow to the monarchy's carefully crafted image. King Charles, who had spent much of his life preparing for the throne, now found himself in the midst of a crisis unlike anything the royal family had faced in modern history. His wife, whom he had stood by for years, had been implicated in a financial scandal that had rocked the nation. While public opinion had always been divided when it came to Queen Camila, no one had expected her to be the center of such a scandal. The gravity of the situation was not lost on the king, and sources close to the palace suggested that he was struggling to come to terms with the impact this would have on his reign. As the media frenzy continued, public opinion was split. There were those who supported the royal family, believing that Queen Camila had been unfairly targeted by the press and the public. Some royal loyalists argued that the monarchy should not be judged solely on the actions of one member, and that Queen Camila had done much to support charitable causes during her time as queen consort. These supporters pointed to her work with various charities, her dedication to causes such as cancer research, and her efforts to raise awareness about domestic violence. However, even the most ardent supporters could not ignore the gravity of the financial scandal. The misuse of public funds for private luxuries was a hard pill to swallow for many who had once respected the royal family. On the other hand, there was a large portion of the public that felt betrayed. For years, they had supported the monarchy, paying taxes that funded the royal family's lavish lifestyle. The idea that millions of pounds had been spent on private jets, secret holidays, and other extravagant luxuries while ordinary citizens struggled to make ends meet was deeply upsetting to many. The anger was palpable, and protests outside Buckingham Palace became more frequent and intense. Signs reading, "Not with our money," and "We demand accountability," became a common sight as people rallied to express their frustration. The scandal was not just confined to the United Kingdom. As news of Queen Camilla's legal troubles spread, it became an international story. Media outlets from around the world picked up the story, with some focusing on the personal aspects of the scandal, while others delved into the broader implications for the monarchy. Royal experts were quick to weigh in, speculating on the long-term effects the scandal would have on Queen Camilla's position, as well as the future of the royal family. Some wondered whether King Charles would be able to maintain his position as monarch, given the depth of the crisis. Others questioned whether the monarchy itself could survive such a blow to its credibility. In the days that followed, the royal family's response to the scandal remained largely focused on damage control. Behind the scenes, palace aides and advisors worked tirelessly to manage the narrative. They knew that the royal family's image had been severely tarnished, and that the public's trust in the monarchy had been shaken. It was clear that the situation was far from over. While Queen Camila's legal team hinted at a possible appeal, many in the palace believed that the damage was already done. The trial, the verdict, and the subsequent public outcry had left an indelible mark on the royal family. While the royal family struggled to manage the public fallout, there was one figure who chose to remain conspicuously silent: Prince William. The heir to the throne, who had always been seen as the future of the monarchy, kept his distance from the scandal. He avoided speaking to the press and declined to comment on his stepmother's legal troubles. Sources close to Prince William suggested that he was deeply hurt by the scandal and that he felt a sense of disappointment and betrayal. While William had always had a strained relationship with Queen Camila, the events of the trial seemed to have deepened the divide. Prince Harry, on the other hand, was more vocal in his response. Though he was not directly involved in the scandal, he was quick to weigh in on the situation, expressing his own frustrations with the royal family. In a now infamous post on Instagram, Harry's wife, Meghan Markle, shared a cryptic message that read, "Karma always knows where to find you." The message was seen by many as a thinly veiled reference to Queen Camila, and it quickly went viral. Supporters of Prince Harry and Meghan cheered the statement, while critics accused them of using the scandal to further their own narrative of royal dysfunction. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham Palace, the mood was grim. Royal advisors held emergency meetings, brainstorming ways to mitigate the damage caused by the scandal. The monarchy, long seen as a symbol of stability and tradition, was now facing an unprecedented crisis. Some in the palace worried that the public's anger would only continue to grow, particularly if further revelations about the misuse of royal funds came to light. There were even discussions about cutting royal funding, with some members of parliament suggesting that the monarchy should be held accountable for its actions. As public opinion continued to sour, the royal family was faced with a difficult decision. Should they attempt to weather the storm and hope that the scandal would eventually fade from the public's consciousness? Or should they take more drastic measures to restore the monarchy's image? There was no easy answer. For the royal family, the stakes were higher than ever. The future of the monarchy was now at risk, and the fallout from Queen Camilla's trial threatened to unravel everything the royal family had worked for. While the royal family grappled with these difficult questions, the public's anger showed no signs of abating. If anything, it seemed to intensify with each passing day. The once unified support for the monarchy was now divided, with many questioning whether the institution had a place in modern Britain. The royal family, long seen as untouchable, was now facing the consequences of its actions. What had once been a symbol of national pride was now at the center of a scandal that could change the course of history. As the days passed following Queen Camila's sentencing, the world's eyes remained fixed on the royal family. The shock of her conviction and the dramatic collapse in court had shaken the public to its core. While some sections of the media and the public were celebrating what they saw as a long-awaited act of justice, there was another group who could not shake the deep unease they felt over the monarchy's future. The verdict had not only dismantled Queen Camila's public image, but also thrust the royal family into a position they had never truly faced before. Queen Camila's health, both physical and emotional, became the focus of the royal family's response. After the events in the courtroom, rumors of her condition began to circulate. Some reports claimed that she was devastated, too broken by the verdict to even leave her private estate. Other sources suggested that she had barely spoken since the trial, retreating into seclusion and distancing herself from the outside world. The monarch's role had always been steeped in duty and public appearances. But now, Queen Camila's life seemed to have been reduced to the four walls of her royal estate. For many, the question that loomed largest was whether or not Queen Camila would ever be able to recover from the scandal. Her fall from grace had been swift and public, and her reputation had taken a massive hit. The sentence of house arrest, along with the loss of royal titles and the stripping of her position as queen consort, had left her without the public image she once enjoyed. For someone who had lived much of her life in the spotlight, the prospect of living in the shadows was a painful one. Behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace, King Charles, too, was facing his own crisis. His wife had been convicted, and his reign was now overshadowed by scandal. While he had publicly supported Camilla, sources close to the royal family revealed that the king was struggling with the gravity of the situation. Behind the carefully crafted public image of a grieving husband stood a man who was privately reeling from the consequences of the scandal. King Charles had long struggled with public perception, especially when it came to his relationship with Camilla. Their love story, one that had been publicly scrutinized for years, had never been without its challenges. Yet, the legal case against Camilla had forced the king to publicly defend a woman whose actions had betrayed the public's trust. The fallout from her trial was now clouding his entire reign, and the monarchy was facing a level of scrutiny that had not been seen in decades. As the royal family faced this crisis, their response became a delicate balancing act. On one hand, they had to manage the public's anger and the media frenzy. On the other, they had to navigate the growing divide within their own ranks. Some members of the royal family, like Prince William, remained notably silent in the face of the scandal, while others, like Prince Harry and Meghan, were more vocal in their opinions. Prince William, as the heir to the throne, faced his own set of challenges. The royal family had long prided itself on unity. But now, with the monarchy under fire, William seemed to withdraw from the limelight. He avoided the press and remained tight-lipped about his feelings regarding his stepmother's conviction. Those close to him suggested that he was deeply disappointed by the events that had transpired. But whether or not that disappointment would manifest in any meaningful way within the family remained unclear. Prince Harry, on the other hand, had made his feelings known. While he was not involved in the scandal directly, he had never shied away from criticizing the monarchy. His cryptic Instagram post about karma had drawn significant attention, with many interpreting it as a pointed jab at Queen Camila. While Harry had long been outspoken in his criticism of the royal institution, the timing of his message only deepened the rift between him and other members of the family. His response to the scandal, combined with his wife Meghan's own comments, made it clear that the Sussexes did not view the monarchy's handling of the situation favorably. The royal family's response to the public's outcry and the media frenzy became a matter of strategy. Behind the scenes, royal advisors were working overtime to handle the narrative. They knew that the monarchy's image had been severely tarnished and that the public's trust in the institution was at an all-time low. For decades, the royal family had weathered scandals and controversies. But this was different. The scope of the financial scandal, the extent of the public outrage, and the sheer visibility of Queen Camilla's fall from grace made this situation unlike anything they had ever encountered. The pressure on the royal family was immense. As the media continued to churn out news stories about the scandal, the public became increasingly impatient. People demanded more than just official statements of support or expressions of sadness. They wanted action. They wanted accountability. For many, the idea that the royal family could continue as if nothing had happened was deeply troubling. There were even calls for a complete overhaul of the monarchy, with some suggesting that the royal family should no longer receive taxpayer funding. The anger was not just directed at Queen Camilla, but at the institution as a whole. The monarchy's continued existence was now being questioned. As the media frenzy continued, another question began to arise. What would happen to the monarchy if Queen Camilla's downfall was just the beginning? For years, there had been rumors of financial mismanagement within the royal family, but the case against Camilla had brought these issues to the forefront in a way that could not be ignored. Some pundits speculated that the scandal could mark the beginning of a new era of royal accountability. Could this be the first step toward dismantling the monarchy as the world knew it? Despite the mounting pressure, Buckingham Palace remained largely silent. The public was growing impatient, and some of the royal family's loyalists began to question why the palace was not doing more to address the growing concerns. Royal spokespeople issued statements reaffirming the family's commitment to charity work and to the British people. But for many, these messages felt hollow. The anger that had once been directed at Queen Camilla was now spreading to the entire royal family. The ripple effect of the scandal was felt beyond the United Kingdom. Commonwealth nations like Australia and Canada, which had long held ties to the British monarchy, began to question whether they should continue their relationship with the crown. Calls to abolish the monarchy were heard not only in the UK, but across the Commonwealth. For many, the idea of an unelected head of state, especially one tainted by scandal, was becoming increasingly untenable. In the midst of all this turmoil, Queen Camilla's fate seemed uncertain. Her house arrest meant that she would be confined to a royal estate, far from the public eye. The public was left wondering whether she would ever be able to rehabilitate her image, or whether the monarchy would ever fully recover from the damage caused by her actions. Meanwhile, there were whispers of an appeal. Queen Camilla's legal team, though defeated in court, hinted that they might challenge the verdict. For some, this was a glimmer of hope that the queen consort might eventually be vindicated. But for many, the damage had already been done. Even if an appeal were successful, Queen Camilla's reputation had been permanently tarnished. The public had seen too much, and trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. The scandal surrounding Queen Camilla was not just a personal failure, it was a failure of the monarchy itself. It raised questions about the future of the British royal family and the role of the monarchy in the modern world. For years, the royal family had been a symbol of stability, duty, and tradition. But now, with the revelations of financial misconduct and the fallout from Queen Camilla's trial, that image was in tatters. What happened next would determine the fate of the British monarchy. Could the royal family recover from this crisis? Or was this the beginning of the end for an institution that had long been a cornerstone of British society? The public was waiting, and the world was watching.